I'm gonna, yeah, yep.
Yeah, well, dude, we're gonna have some fun, man. This is exciting stuff, man. Well, welcome to the Power Life Podcast. I'm Patrick, as always, and I have with me again Mr. LC King. Today's gonna be a fun one. What's up, LC?
Good. Thanks for having me again.
Dude, of course, man. You between you and Zach and just community of people just have so much information that's so fascinating to me, and I know many others. And that all being said, today's going to be a little different. For those who have seen some of the other episodes, Mr. LC is going to take us on a little journey in explaining some of the things that he's come across through his uh, observation, experimentation, as well as his research. So, without further ado, I'm going to kind of let him take the reins and just take us on this journey. What do you have for us?
Well, basically, I've been applying the fundamentals of a battery to our world and accumulating information regarding that. So, yep, I'll basically try and walk you through this. I've got a bit of a mind map here that I've been creating. So we'll try, hopefully it comes across okay. I'm still working on it, but so let's basically start with just some general viewpoints that I have about our world, and so that'll give us, the guys that are watching, girls, some basic fundamentals of how I perceive things, and then we can go into the battery stuff.
Sounds great.
So first up, I see it as our world is more of like a toroidal field. And this is just from some of the esoteric literature, as well as it just seems to fit with what's going on.
So, what
And
is it
so in
exactly?
this we have
Yeah.
a toroidal field.
Yeah.
Um,
Those who don't.
it's basically sort of how a magnet works, actually. So you'll have a positive end and a negative end, and then the field that's created around it, and in between those two you have what's known as a dielectric plane, which is where the positive and negative meet. And so when you apply that to the world, we get this sort of, I guess, circular pattern. Sun and moon, you can see in the upper top portion, the earth is in that dielectric plane, and then lower down. So that's the basis of that idea of applying it to our world.
Right. And real quick, and based off of Polaris, right? When you look at Polaris through that constellation, it does not move, right? So when you're looking at
no, that's right.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we're seeing again rotation happening.
So Polaris would be just where that, Polaris would be that where that plus sign is. Perfect. Basically.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's just the basic structure that I see things operating at, and it's sort of the fundamentals of how energy would be sort of cycling around. These have directional cycles, and and I also think that there's a dome, there's a physical barrier there. This is to do with pressure gradients, as well as you can't have a pressure. We're in a pressurized system basically, and you can't have that without a boundary.
Right.
So,
as you said in our last time, it's like having a tire pressure without the rubber itself.
Yeah, exactly.
You need it.
Yeah, well, I think that we're in a enclosed system, and energy doesn't leave the system. It just cycles.
Right.
Basis. So toroidal sort of fields. We're in an enclosed environment, and that energy is cycling around.
Right.
So, take it or leave it. That's just how I perceive things. And I think the stars are sort of like they're a part of the dome, but we're not actually seeing them. They're more like a projection, as far as I can sort of tell, that it's more like a projection rather than the actual dome itself.
Right.
And the reason for that is because the stars, you got it here. The stars is a fixture in the dome, implied by the fact that the stars do not change position relative to each other.
Right.
So the turning of the stars could possibly be a projection created via the change in magnetic fields due to the sun's position. It's just a few ideas that I've had, not necessarily correct. People can just take what I say.
Right.
They can take it or leave it, or parts of it, or whatever it is. So it's, I'm
Right.
just showing you
Well,
how I perceive things. So yeah.
well, taking it from somebody who hasn't looked into it as much as you, understanding though, when I look outside my window or I walk outside at night and I see those stars, I can point out, okay, there's Orion's belt, there's the Big Dipper. So as you said, they aren't changing in relationship to each other. It's going to be the same thing every time. Where they obviously are in the sky is different, but
Yeah, that's well, it speaks to me that it's like a fixture. It's almost
Mhm.
like a fixture, but and then it's like, well, how is it rotating? Because if we're in a physical structure, a dome, or a place that's holding that pressure, well, how is that fixture, or how are those stars actually moving? And
Mhm.
that's why I think it's more to do with magnetics and a sort of like almost like a reflection of something rather than the actual physical boundary that we're looking at.
So
Does that
then,
make sense? Yeah.
yeah. So then my question is, looking at cymatics, when you see people with their own cameras who've documented and shown video of these frequencies, the vibrations when they've zoomed into stars, um,
Mm.
how would that be a projection? I guess if we're seeing basically, like I said, a cymatic frequency.
Um, well, I think it could be something like a holographic projection, and you're still looking through a medium, and it's
Mhm.
basically intersections of light at that point,
Right. Right.
or nodal points. So this is just speculation. I'm not
Right.
sure. I'm just trying to work it out in my head. What if these stars aren't moving in relation to each other, then how do they rotate? Obviously, if you're going to have if they're in the fixed dome, that whole dome would create chaos if it was
Right.
moving, and
Right.
that just it just seems, this is the logical sort of
Right.
progression I have, and there may be some critical piece of information that I just
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
overlooked completely.
Yeah.
So, it's
Um,
just one of those things.
Yeah, hold on. You can, if you want to jump to the next one, I'm just gonna quickly turn this off real quick. Hold on.
Yep. So I've done a little video on this before, and it's basically world gradients, and we can just look at some of the different things that are happening here. So as you go higher up into the atmosphere, you're getting more charge. Um, there's atmospheric stratification as well. That's basically where there's limits to different sort of densities of gas. And there's a pressure gradient, so it's higher pressure as you get towards sea level and lower pressure as up above. So we're at the as we go up, we're basically increasing charge, and we're also increasing or lowering the pressure.
Hmm.
So those two things are pretty important for the whole um, battery sort of ideas as well.
Right. And
Now there is, yeah,
when you're saying when you're going a charge, as you go more increased charge, is that the positive charge, kind of like that electrostatic, the incoherent electrostatic acceleration type stuff?
yeah, it is. That's right. It's um, you could say it's positive, or you can just say an increase in charge.
Okay.
You can so just a lower charge down the bottom, but I don't want to really get into semantics of positive and negative. Yeah, I guess it could be more positive at the top and negative down the bottom. And this also, there is a thing where if you've got a dome as well, going the wrong way there. Sorry about
There you go.
that. I've got it up here. It's interesting that static is created by the collection of excess charge on a surface, the charge of the discharge of this charge is what transmits energy, but it's not like the current electricity. Static electricity is described as sound waves of electrified air. So there is the possibility that there is a static accumulation that, because of the movement of that toroidal field, and it's moving across the surface of the dome, that it's actually building up charge that way. And that was just an idea that I'd had as well, that could actually increase
Right.
this charge as rarefied air moves over a surface.
Right. Well, can I chime in real quick?
Mm.
Would there be then also like ley lines? We talk about ley lines on in different parts of the world, specifically parts of the country. Does that play a role into then some of these static charges or this energy um, within, or is that just completely
I,
separate?
mm, I would say it's maybe a little bit different. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's hard to know because, like, yeah, a lot of these, the way they've done these buildings and schematics on the ground, it looks like they're mirroring some of the star patterns as well. So,
Yeah.
is there
Oh,
something to do with
definitely.
that? Yeah,
Yeah.
don't know. I think their sciences were well beyond ours.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, in regards to the so just I guess let's, and I know you have many more other things, but in regards to an overview, you're looking at it, basically the mindset of a toroidal field that's what's creating a lot of this energy that we're experiencing, the potential.
well, I think it's a function of the sun and moon's actions, actually.
Oh, okay.
And how they actually operate will be moving those airs. And there's a type of refinement. Um, if we have a quick look at world distillation, this idea that we have a cold moon and a hot sun,
Hmm.
well, you're going to get there's a distillation type process happening
Yep.
where the sun basically is heating the ocean waters, and the moon, being that opposite polarity of cooling, is actually condensing. So there's this sort of pumping action that happens day in, day out, and it's rarefying elements.
Hmm.
And this ties into the world winds. That's like as they spin, they're mixing elements and, yeah, rarefying the airs basically. And this rarefied air, and these subtler elements, is what I think creates what's called a atmospheric electrolyte.
Hmm.
And this has been termed, in the heliocentric model, as like the ionosphere.
Hmm.
But rather than the sun outside of the Earth's sort of magnetic field and things, and that sun actually sending its energy to that magnetic field and creating that ionosphere. This is a ionosphere created from the action of the sun and moon within.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. I mean,
And we see that
go on.
the and if you look at this sort of atmospheric electrolyte, well, there is a sort of interplay, like as above so below type mechanism, where you would see this interplay with the thermohaline circulation.
Hmm.
So this is a bit of a dodgy drawing that I did, but this is basically like the way that these hot and cold waters move around
Hmm.
the oceans.
Wow.
And it's, yeah. So there is a definite interaction between how the sun sends its energy into the oceans, expanding the waters, lifting the salts up, and creating a cyclic effect and drawing off certain elements.
Right.
Um,
In If I may, when you see the points where where the red and the blue kind of then intermix, right? Is it's showing? I'm assuming when you're seeing that shift of night and day basically starting to occur, where it's basically just passing on that baton, right? As you said, is the heat from the sun is lifting the salts, pulling them up. Then there's that cooling effect, as you said, that's pinching it back out where they're meeting. Is that correct?
This is seems to me more like current flows of the lower lines, the blue lines are actually go deeper,
Oh,
and
I
then the
see.
red
Okay.
line. So it's more like the surface level is warmer, and then there's these flows that are set up. And I think it's, I was playing with the idea that it was more like a flow battery.
Hmm.
So so the flow battery, we can talk about that a bit later, but I'll take you over here for a second and show you. Um, and so this is a flow battery here. It's an interesting battery, mm, because it uses basically two different electrolytes. Struggling with this. There you go.
Hmm.
So you have two different electrolytes, and then there's like a porous salt bridge, and when they sort of cycle around, they actually interact, and that gives charge.
Right. So what are the
So
two charges? What are the two elements or that they're
they can be made out of different things. There's different types of flow batteries, but as long as they're two different electrolytes, and they can actually swap charges in a sense,
right?
and that will create a. And I was just thinking, is that flow battery a part of, this circulation? And there's still more work to be done here.
Right.
But it's interesting, with when you look at the Arctic circle, or the Antarctic circle rather, there's more potassium nitrates being created there. So is there a connection between this flow battery and this thermohaline circulation? Maybe not.
Yeah.
It's just two different constitutions, yeah, working together to actually create a flowing mechanism.
Well, this
So,
goes to when we chatted the other day, if I may, when we were talking about this flow battery. As you said, as above, so below. What does this remind us of? The body pumping
uh,
in oxygenated blood and deoxygenated
mhm.
blood. If you want to maybe,
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you could relate the circulation. Now it's interesting you say that, because I was reading an article about this guy that was actually taking seawater um, from about 30 feet below, and what he was doing was using that as a blood plasma. So
wow,
there is this sort of connection between
right,
um, how the heart works with voltage differentials between two different electrolytes, and this guy actually using the seawater as for plasma in the blood and helping people that way. So it's just
right.
really, really interesting, these connections
Well,
between
do you know what his name
uh,
was?
Renee Quinton. I can give you the article, and you can put
Yeah,
it underneath, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I would
link
love to.
people to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Because I mean, it does go to just show you, right? Okay, what does the body need? Creating charge, it needs, vitamins, minerals that have these charges that our body feeds off of, right? So if
Hmm.
something, as you said, like if it's going 30 feet below and you're getting this salt water that's like basically like a filler for plasma or whatever, what's in it, right? It's all of those vitamins and minerals that are getting pulled up from, beneath or below earth, deep in the ocean. Same thing with, and I know you have some stuff on this with volcanoes, right? What is being
Hmm.
spewed out, right? A lot of
Hmm.
these minerals and that our body naturally takes in.
Yeah, and like the cells themselves are a type of battery as well, and similar to this flow battery, in that they use sodium and potassium. So they use those two sort of electrolytes, and one's an internal in the cell and one's an external. I think the sodium's in the external, but it's
Mhm.
that sort of difference between that actually allows the cell to move. So uh, very interesting. They called that the sodium potassium pump.
So actually, if I may, I think we talked about this a while ago, but I've read about a gentleman, Dr. Gilbert Ning Ling, who came up with this thing called the AI hypothesis, which was an association induction hypothesis. And he worked with Dr. Freeman W. Cope and Dr. Michael Demadian. And what was happening was the article or the journal where they were describing the sodium potassium pump never actually was able to completely clear and make certain that there was this pump of any kind. They didn't have any true hard facts. So what they ended up doing themselves is they basically poisoned a cell to neutralize everything and just kind of poison so it didn't do anything. And they were then running its systems to see what would happen with that quote unquote pump. And there's actually this free flow of the fluid moving through. And they were like, well, how is this happening if we've basically inhibited everything from actually doing anything? And what ended up happening comes to the fourth phase of water and understanding the structure of water within the system and how that itself carries such an electric charge that works with those the flow of sodium into the cell and potassium in the cell, sodium out of the cell. And what was happening is when you have poor water, poor obviously nutrition, when you're not getting those electric charges from the foods you're eating and obviously clean water, what's happening is it's affecting the charge of not just the cells in regards to the sodium and the potassium, but what you're then getting is just again that fourth phase of water that's allowing it to move through the body with ease. So there was a big part of that too. And what was interesting, right, is when they when you damage a cell and tissue damage, right, what ends up happening is there's an influx of salt that gets into the cell with water, which then creates a lot of the inflammation type processes. So
so it's almost like the electrolytes are getting out of balance.
Exactly.
The charges are getting out of balance, so you're not able to actually it's not able to function. I mean, that makes sense to me, definitely.
And just taking a step further is when you then have a charge that's out of balance, knowing that we are electric beings, what does that then just naturally do into your neurologic system, right?
Well, the nervous system is all based on these sort of charges and electrolytes as well, because the battery plays a huge role in understanding the body in that way as well.
Yep.
Electrochemical mechanisms in the body for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's all over the place. And that's what once I've got into this stuff, you can see it's just gone mental. I haven't even finished this, and there's just so much information to try and go through and put it all together.
So then, unless there's something on this side that we want to jump into, would you want to maybe try to just explain what are the 4 or 5 elements, and maybe getting to the battery side, or is there other stuff for the world overview that you wanted to touch on?
No, that's probably it. We can go into the battery stuff, basically how I apply it and the different sorts of batteries. So I just got some battery types here. And the first one I looked at was the galvanic cell. So, and this is probably the best one to sort of explain and give people an idea of at least where to research as well. And it's basically made up of, so this is dodgy, isn't it? Anyway, so here's the galvanic cell. It's pretty simple in its construction. You have 2 different electrolytes, and that would be the one in the gray there and one in the blue.
So what are in those?
Have just salt water. That's all it is.
And then what is so there's a zinc sulfate, and then what's on the other kind? A copper?
There's sulfates in there as well.
Okay.
It's dissolved zinc sulfate. So it's just water, salt, and sulfur. So they're your sort of 3 elements that are in that. So you have on this zinc portion here, this would be your negative polarity of the battery, and then you'd have the copper here, which is your positive polarity of the battery. And you
Mhm.
see the plus and the minus. Now, this zinc one here, the negative polarity in the battery is called an anode. And on the positive side, this one's called a cathode. So energy in the galvanic cell moves from anode to cathode. That's the where these the material moves from, and it's this differential between these two, or most of them put them as electrons moving.
Mhm.
But I try not to touch on that too much. But
Yeah.
this potential difference is what creates your electricity. So this would be a light bulb or whatever appliance you're working with. And this middle section here between these two electrolytes is called a salt bridge. So if we think about this in a four element terms, like the old four elements, we have this salt bridge, which separates the two electrolytes and allows for a passing between these end products that are coming off here as they break down.
Mhm.
Um, they sort of join together. It acts as like a capacitor. It stops the battery from actually going to equilibrium really quickly and then just burning out quickly.
Right.
So when we think about the salt bridge, it's just, we think in terms to apply it to the world, it would be Earth.
Mhm.
And then we have the different electrolytes here, and that would be the oceans. So when we apply the positive and negative terminals, the negative anodic side would be the moon, and the positive cathode side is the sun.
And as you said, when we see the sunrise and then the sunset, and then the moon comes in, the moon exits, stage right, whatever. What you're seeing is just that, right? Is this continuum of this energy that's being pushed. And
Hmm.
it's as simple as this, right? If you ask somebody, are you getting the same energy or the same feeling from the sun as you do the moon? No one's getting the same type of energy, right? We just
No, no.
tapping into those energies is super important. That I think is lost on a lot of us, or the innate ability to just tap into it. Um, and with obviously for reasons, but it's on us to then look back and go, okay, well, we're getting something from this. Let's try to understand that. So, I mean, it makes complete sense to me, but for those watching, you see, it becomes truly the
Yeah.
cycle.
And what you're sort of referring to is this polarity dynamic that the sun's hot, the moon's cold. There's just a polarity of energy going on, and when you have those potential differences between two things, that's when energy actually is able to work. If there's no potential, if you haven't got your car at the top of the hill, and there's a potential difference between the height of the car at the top of the hill and the bottom of the hill, well, there's no energy going to flow. If you just got the car on the flat road, there's nothing going to happen. You give a slight little push to that car on the hill, all of
Right,
a sudden you got a potential energy, and it's going
right,
to fly down. So you can see this like a bridge. One This is the potential difference between the two that actually allows for energy to transfer.
right. Yep. And what's interesting is when looking at the water being the electrolyte, is that as much as we are aware that there's these different phases of water, we tend to forget, right? Is that when the sun is pulling up, opening up to pull these salts, right? You see an evaporation of some sorts, right? So we know that we're basically within this water system all the time. It's just not, in our mind, we're like, oh,
Mhm.
water, we're drenched, are underwater in its liquid form. But obviously, when the sun's pulling up, like you're getting all of that evaporation, right? You're getting, or
Mhm.
steam, whatever the case is. So you're constantly, lack of a better term, underwater all the time. So when you allow yourself to understand that process happening, you then can really visually see this potential happening, this shift constantly occurring.
Well, we have the normal water cycle as well, which is basically, the sun, and you get this distillation that happens anyway when the sun moves over the waters, and it rains. It's not raining salt water; it's taken those salts out and distilled them off. But
Hmm.
there are, in alchemy and things like that, there are lighter elements that sort of go up even higher, and that's basically what I'm talking about when you've got your oceans, which are an electrolyte, but you've also got an upper electrolyte. And so this is this really refined, and you would call it a refined air or ether.
Hmm.
That's what it was really known as. That refined air is ether. So, and that's what I'm talking about. What are these elements that create this upper electrolyte? And an electrolyte, as we've explained, is just um, a way of transferring energy through a medium. So let's have a quick look here. So, an electrolyte substance that conducts electrical current as a result of dissociation into positive and negative charged particles called ions. So, if you have water with no salt in it and it's pure distilled water, it's a perfect insulator. There's no electricity able to flow through that water.
Yep.
As soon as you add the dissolved salts within it, then it becomes an electrolyte and you're able to transfer energy through it.
Right. So let's take that then to the body, right? When we always hear about, oh, when you're exercising, you need to get those electrolytes, or if you're feeling down, get electrolytes. What is that, right? In understanding when you're exercising or you're moving, they say get up and move. You want to increase that the internal temperature of the body to start is creating these potentials. And when you have
Mhm.
obviously an appropriate amount of electrolytes, that's what then fuels that charge. That's what gives you those charges. So obviously people who are working, Gatorade jumped on this. It's like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
we're out in Florida. These guys are getting hot. They're dehydrating. So we're just going to put really just sugar, but we're putting electrolytes in it. And obviously
Which
that's
is just salt.
right.
Honestly, that is chucking salt in there.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
like you're
Which
drinking salt water.
salt and sugar. But that's
Yeah.
what's, but it's sold, but it is still, that's the thing is part of the grabble of the whole thing is that it is important. You need those electrolytes, but when you're obviously selling a product, it you want to be able to do it in mass production. But that is
Yeah.
showing but once again, the as above so below is that the system that we are in, it is in your body as well, and it's something that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
overlook.
That's exactly right. And this all ties into how your body functions as well. And I think this is why part of the old system used this four elements technique. They understood the operation of the battery in this sense, in this you by applying it to the world, but also to the body. So
Hmm.
they could say, well, if you've got a temperature all the time, well, what do we do to actually, correct these imbalances in the body? So
Yeah.
they were looking at it from an energetic, but also, electrochemical perspective. So,
Right.
certain plants do certain things. They have certain sort of dispositions to actually, help the body in a certain way, or give the body something that help the functioning so it actually starts to bring this back into balance.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, as you said, even just looking to plants, right? Like when you're looking at like peas, for example, snap peas or something in that regard, right? They soak up a lot of nitrogen.
Hmm.
So when you're in your soil, first thing is like, do I even have enough nitrogen? Do I have enough of that type of charge in my soil to facilitate this? But it's also a matter of, okay, do I have other things like a mulch in my soil that's not on the surface, right? It gets underneath, that's then absorbing and fighting for that nitrogen.
Hmm.
Little thing, you know what I mean? It's like it's you start to realize it's the same thing. It's like, oh, I'm seeing the outcome of maybe my snap
Yeah,
peas
it's
growing.
connected.
Yeah, my snap peas aren't growing. Why? Oh, okay. Well, is there a deficiency of some sort of mineral, some charge that it needs? And as you said, they're different as well, just like people. But what we're seeing is like the not so vibrant plant growing, you see that
Yeah.
outcome and you think, oh, it's something's wrong with the plant. But it's like, no, like what's going on in the soil? Like what
Yeah.
is this charge happening? Is there charge? You know what I mean? So that's just something to constantly show everybody that this is happening everywhere around us, within us. As I said last time, we are a part of the system. We are no different. We aren't separate from it.
Yeah, and as I research different elements of this, there is those things like the body side of things come into it. Soil biology and all that sort of stuff comes into this as well. You're looking at the sulfates and some of the acids created, or the alkaline sort of stuff. You don't want your soil too alkaline. You don't want your soil too acidic. You want it in that nice pH range. You want it in the
Mhm,
center of these two. Just like your body will have certain components that are alkaline, certain components that are acidic. Now
mhm.
these components, are probably working together in some fashion to generate energy as well, just like temperature differentials in the body.
Yeah.
So, it's a complicated system for sure. And, how these all connect, and, I'm not there yet, that's for sure. But
Right.
it's definitely something that people can look into, and maybe apply this sort of stuff and if they understand the body, this could bring information about the world. It's not it doesn't have to go one way or the other. If we understand ourselves, we can maybe understand the world a bit better as well.
Couldn't agree more.
So
Um,
it's yeah.
yeah, go on. Go.
So,
Yeah.
uh, well, I've just got some of the we can look here at some of the constituents of the ocean waters. So it's got chloride, sodium, sulfates, magnesium, calcium, and potassium. I mean, you know, those are all things that your body needs too.
Those are the
So,
electrolytes.
yeah, that's it.
That's
That's
literally,
it.
there's studies that show, I think, over like 85 or 90% of them, I think it's the American population, is deficient in magnesium or something like that. Like it's a crazy,
Yeah.
I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like it's up there. And I say potassium's another one. I'm not sure exactly just about
And
sulfates.
all these you can make a battery out of too.
Yeah,
Like, you can have a sodium potassium battery.
yeah.
You need your sulfates in there to actually, add as the acids for, say a lead acid battery.
Hmm.
You got magnesium, the calcium. So these are all different types of batteries based on different electrolytes.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it just all matches like that.
And it's just so fascinating when you, well, think of it like this, just to bring it, because for me, the body, when I go back to the body, it just registers a lot easier for me. But when you look at how you just said, oh, you can make a battery with the calcium and the potassium
Mhm.
and the sodium, and then it goes to show you, well, we need all these vitamins and minerals. So think about how many compare pairs that are occurring at once, and
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
how many batteries are happening simultaneously.
And what are these, different elements? Some like a lithium ion battery for your drill. It's got quick power. It's
Hmm.
quick recharge. It's there when you sort of need it. It can, but then you look at a lead acid battery or something different. Well, it's got a big current. It can hold that charge for ages. It's got a lot of sort of oomph behind it, where the
Hmm.
lithium ion doesn't. Does this play a role in certain? Are there certain sort of battery type operations happening in us for different reasons? One's for a longer duration, sort of say if you're going for a long run,
Right.
certain
Yep.
elements start to kick in, or you're doing
Exactly.
short sprints. What are you using then?
Yep. And that's
So it just ideas that I've had about it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is this is something in my world that we've talked about, right? Understanding the different muscle types. That's how we looked at it, and we're discussing. Hey, this is, you have a
Hmm.
type 1A, type 2B, type two, type 2, type 2B. So you have these different types, and understanding that yes, they're feeding off of. We tend to look at it from the macro part. Oh, this is more carbohydrate driven. This is more fats and carbohydrates and this and that, but we
Yeah.
don't necessarily get into the meat and potatoes. And this was something for me in the longest time, was I'm like, what are we missing, or what is not being expressed? And so a lot of these things just start to click, and as you understand it from the battery standpoint, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this really does
Mm.
make so much sense. And understanding, oh, when you are on these long runs, what, instead of like, okay, what foods, but what are the minerals, what are the charges, that what is in it, you're in it, obviously there's so
Yeah.
many things, but what is it known for, what's its abundance? And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
yeah, so
Yeah, like there's so many correlations, and I think it's something that's yet to be tapped. And I think it's something that the flat Earth model is going to unveil for us. And I think it's super exciting to me. All this stuff is. It's like, wow, there's just so much information at the fingertips that we can start to integrate, take out of the helio or the globe model sort of context, put it into our context, and then all of a sudden we're going to see a integration. And that's what I'm all about, is integrating different knowledge, integrating it into, so I don't have to have a bit of information here and try and remember that. If I've got a basic schematic like the
right.
four elements, and I have a decent understanding of it, boom, apply it,
Hmm.
and I should be able to apply it. And it's just like the Trinity, the this idea of positive, negative, and the balance point between.
Right.
I can apply that simple concept to everything I'm working on, and
Right.
it's going to give me some sort of result
Hmm.
or some sort of understanding. It's like putting on a set of glasses, and you're like, all of a sudden, um, you know, I just find it really fascinating.
Well, you bring that up, and I know we talked about this the other day. Unless there's something else in here that we wanted to get to specifically, maybe talking in the basis. Okay, what are the three main elements that we, as you were saying, were like the Trinity, and then we can maybe go into the more into that
Um,
Mercury mythology. Oh yeah, perfect.
yeah, so
Do you
three
want to jump into this?
substances, and this is just part of the battery as well.
Hmm.
So you got the sulfur and your salts. You can have two different types of salts in the galvanic battery. It's the sodium chloride and potassium nitrate.
Okay.
So they're the ones I focus on mainly, for simplicity. And the sodium chloride I pair with the sun, and potassium nitrate I pair with the moon.
Okay.
And the sulfur to both. It's sort of like, they call it the secret fire. It acts as an electrolyte as well, and that's the other thing. These getting lost now. So these salts here, so nitric acid, sulfuric acid, and hydrochloric acid. So they're just forms of those salts
Hmm.
when they're mixed with the sulfurs.
Okay.
So sulfurs added to the potassium nitrates, you'll get your nitric acid. Sulfurs, and you'll get the hydrochloric acid, as far as I understand. And these acids here are, electrolytes, and they're gases.
Right.
So that's what I think's actually, uh, you know, happening in the upper atmosphere. These natural products are just being lifted up into the atmosphere.
Hmm.
So yeah, so these are the three basic substances, and then we can see that we'll get to mercury in a bit because mercury is important, but
Yeah.
it's sort of separate to the salts
Yeah.
and the sulfur. And so we can just see here that it's they get lifted up through. Sorry, got to get better at this program, don't
No, no worries, man.
I? Just by volcanic action, basically. So the sun's going to be lifting up your sodium chlorides, your potassium nitrates as well. I think they're going to go toward them up, but the the sun moving over the oceans, you're going to get sodium chloride salt. It's just
Mm.
salt water, and then yeah, sulfurs are going to be generated through um, the volcanic activity, and that's volcanoes are happening all the time. So
Right.
there's plenty of sulfurs and acids getting thrown up into the atmosphere
Right. And when also too,
via.
well, even just a for those just who've seen videos of volcanoes, right, and understanding that when you see explosions, you're seeing it just go straight up and dispersing. That's it,
Mhm.
right? So it's not, as it gets higher, it's not moving with any current of 1,000 miles an hour or anything like that. So just something to consider when you're watching, what's right in front of our eyes. It is like it's going up, and then obviously it's dispersing in all directions.
Yeah, well, you're going to get once it like they have such force, some of those, and you're seeing sort of the ash on that one there, but
Mhm.
the amount of fine gases that are going to be pumped up before even you see all that sort of stuff is going to be huge.
Yeah,
um, and and then they're going to get up into the atmosphere like that pumping action of the sun and the moon, and then those winds created by the sun moving around. I mean, you're just mixing that up
right.
constantly and refining it out. So it just makes sort of perfect sense to me that it's generating this electrolyte from the lower portion.
Yeah,
It's just super interesting anyway.
yeah, oh yeah,
Um,
definitely. I mean, and that goes to show you, right, when we do talk about, the different gases that are emitted by people comparatively to volcanic actions, it's nowhere near, right? We just don't see volcanoes all the time, but as you said, they are happening everywhere,
mhm.
islands everywhere. Um, and I mean, there was one just the other day that I think went off near Iceland or something like that, or
Yeah.
somewhere up there.
I
So
think there's I think I read it was about 40 a year, but they would some would be bigger than others and some just keep going for ages.
right,
So
and
some are just constantly, you know,
well,
ticking away.
but as you said earlier too, to the point of some of them aren't necessarily doing the volcanic lava and everything, but just as you said, just emitting the gases. There could be that type of um, volcanic activity that we just maybe aren't seeing, or in our mind we think, oh, it's a volcano erupted. We're thinking the biggest thing, like in the movies, or
Yeah, exactly.
okay, but really it's just sometimes just gases being emitted, um, playing its role
And
there.
there's underwater ones as well that we don't
Yeah,
really usually talk about very much as well. So there's underwater volcanic activity. There's also, um, there's sulfates and things in the oceans themselves.
right.
So it could be just a slower process to get it out of the oceans and lift it up and churn it around. But it's again, these elements are all there, and there's abundance of them.
Yep. Uh,
So one of the main things I sort of uh, differentiate from a lot of um, models is that I say the planets are metal,
mhm.
and I have reasons for that, and that's just looking at. This will take a little bit of explaining, but we'll first start with how they can actually form, and it's really through this mercury. And then mercury's been like from day one as of trying to go through this sort of process of working this stuff out, has been haunting me. Is like, what is it, what are you,
Yeah.
um and so I was like, where do you fit in? Because I previously thought it was sodium, potassium, and then I thought, oh, it's just the electrolyte, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you just call it what it is? And so I finally said, well, what is this metal, and what are the characteristics of this metal to make it so important to this, this what I'm presenting, this model. Um, so here are the main characteristics here. It's liquid at room temperature. It's got a high surface tension and its ability to amalgamate metals. What that means is you can get, say, gold leaf or gold or silver or different types of metals, and it will actually accumulate it in itself. And this is what people get silver amalgams for their teeth and things like that. It's just basically mercury mixed with another metal.
Yeah. And if you want to,
So
real quick, that video you have of showing how the amalgamation with the gold that you had,
yeah,
if you want to just send that to me, I can also put that so people can see exactly what.
yeah, that's cool, isn't it?
It was very cool.
Yeah.
Just so it's not just words being said, it's actually showing people demonstrating.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It also has other interesting characteristics. It can be used as electrical rectification. It's got a bit of magnetism as well as, and you will see them used in mercury switches. So it's able to, because it's a liquid, the switch is based on which way you tilt it. So it can actually turn off if you tilt your mechanism one way and then turn back on because it rolls down. But so I was looking into it. Okay, so how much mercury is actually produced by volcanoes, and it's like 1,000 tons per year in this chart I was saying. So that's quite a bit. Now, because it's in a form that can be in a gaseous form, then I thought, well, is this accumulating metals into the atmosphere? And because of its high surface tension, is it creating this basically these balls of amalgamated metals?
Mm-hmm.
So there's the other thing that goes along with this. When you got the idea that the higher you go up, the more electricity is there, or the more static electricity, while you're coming into what's known as electrolysis as well. Now, electrolysis is it's basically a battery, but you're reversing it. Instead of getting energy out of it, you're putting energy in to create a reaction.
Hmm.
So you can see here there's a cathode and anode, and you've got a battery that puts in to create these different elements or create a separation of charge. And you can create metal refinement just by that activity. So as soon as you've got charge potentials, you've got higher atmospheric charge, you've got a mercury accumulating metals, then we can see how this process indeed could create these metal planets, basically.
Right. And so with that being said, just one thing that you put here is the oxidation on the moon. Did you want to tap into that, or did you want to jump to this part here?
No, I'll go into, I'll explain this a little bit first, just because it's all well and good to have metal planets, but how they stay up there, how do they do their thing? And it's basically through static electricity or static levitation. So we might be able to put in a small clip of a video or something for this too, but you get a high voltage levitation, high current levitation, and I've done a video on this guy before, George S. Piggott, and it was sort of it was a while back in the past, but he was showing the levitation of these balls and how it works. And it's the same thing as if you would go, get your static electricity and then you levitate the little balls of aluminium foil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the same principle as that.
Right.
So
he's using a little more power to create that, a little more potential.
Yeah. There's way more power. Yeah. When you put it into context of, how big the oceans are and how much actually power is being generated. I mean, it's massive, but this is just a smaller scale, and it's showing that we can do it smaller scale.
Well, let's staying on George S. Piggott for a sec. What year do you know the years he was doing this?
I think it was in the 1930s or something like that, that he was working with this sort of thing. And what he was actually doing, he wasn't under the flat Earth paradigm. Obviously, he was working to say, well, how could these planets communicate with each other?
Right.
And he was looking at long distance communication, and he was just so I just saw what he was doing and said, well, this is exactly the same as how you would get a levitation of planets. So
Hmm.
it sort of reaffirmed these, older alchemical ideas where in the zodiac and things like that, they have, well, each planet has a metal associated with it.
Right.
So here, for example, it's the the sun was associated with gold, the moon silver, Mercury was with mercury, Venus was with copper, Mars was with iron, Jupiter was tin, and Saturn was lead. And this is actually how I found the the galvanic cell in the first place, because I wasn't actually looking for um, a model of how our world works. I was trying to work out what's going on with the zodiac. Why is that so important?
Hmm.
Um, and so I saw these associations, and I thought, well, why are they in that order? And so it's a certain order of cathode to anode. Um, so yeah, you can see that this is a progression
Hmm.
from one to the other. Whereas the sun in this case is the only cathode in the system. It's the only really highly positive. Next in line is silver and the moon sort of thing. And so Saturn as the most outer planet is um is the lead for a specific reason actually, but we'll keep moving on.
Yeah.
We'll show you some similarities between the metals and the planets. So this is like an oxidation on the left hand side. There's an oxidation of metal, and on the right hand side there's the moon, the picture of the moon. So you can see these two justified to each other, and you can see that there's a quite a large similarity between those two.
Right. And just, for people who don't necessarily understand, is the way with the globe model is they'll say, oh, those are asteroids, but anything coming in at an angle can't hit directly down. However, it has been expressed that if from some of their points of view that coming at an angle, if it's coming fast enough at a certain angle, it magically just does a downward crater. Which if you see anything coming at an angle, it's you're going to see obviously some sort of skid. So they can't explain it, but they say it's just there's a specific angle that magically allows that to happen, and that's their words, not mine. Um,
Mhm.
so that's just something to consider when seeing obviously this side by side and seeing, okay, wow, that looks like a 1-to-1 ratio in regards to what I'm visually seeing myself.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, definitely.
so
So
very interesting.
was sort of explained how the just to sort of go over this one more time.
Hmm.
So we've explained that Mercury can go up into the atmosphere. It has high surface temperature and the ability to amalgamate metals, and we know it gets up there through the volcanoes.
Yeah.
We know that there's an atmospheric electrolysis that could be occurring, and this will be the refinement of the metals. And
It's just putting
we
energy
can see this
system.
see the similarities. We can make sense of some of the zodiac sort of why they would say that these planets are metals and what type of metals. Now, with electrolysis as well, I mean, you're getting high purities of metals as well.
Hmm.
And then we can see that these can levitate with high electric fields in high electric fields. So you get a high voltage levitation and a high current levitation.
Yep.
So that's just a quick retouch of that.
Yep.
Um,
Oh, what's this little point here? Meteorite.
Yeah, and then there's the other. You can see there's examples of. Yeah, well, like meteorites. Some of them are rock, but a lot of them are metals as well. So definitely a refinement of. There's something going on up there to refine those. If you're getting metals come down
Right. Well, I
from
mean,
the.
did you see the thing the other day in Washington? The people were capturing footage of what they were saying was part of the Starlink coming back into the atmosphere. But
All
did
right.
you see that?
No.
It was this insane phenomenon where you were seeing these almost look like the Fantastic Four, the fire dude. You know how when he's going through
Yeah.
the sky, it's basically like in the night sky you see these a bunch of those going across the sky, some fading out and then coming back in, and
Oh wow.
it was. I'll see if I can get some footage and I'll send it to you if I can find it. But it was super fascinating. People were filming like, "What is this?" And everyone's like, "Oh, it's just the Starlink. Something broke and it's come back in here." But if you're actually watching, just using logic for a sec, the way it's going is it's going directly across. So
Yeah.
it's obviously coming into a field. Like if from the logic here, if it's coming in, it's going to come at an angle. Like look geometry here, right?
Yeah.
Up. If it's coming across, it's going to come across and down. Where this was just going horizontal. If you're watching people's cameras, they're
Yeah. Well, if you've got gravity,
right,
your gravity is going to come down and go whoa straight
exactly
down. It's
right.
going to be
So
pulling it towards it.
what really was fascinating with me was seeing this happen, and you're seeing, as I said, the light, this bright lights are coming through, like almost like just arrows, like a fire, and then there was someone fade out, and then someone come back in. You're like, what is that? And so I don't have an answer, and I haven't dug crazy deep into it, but I think in regards to, as you said, meteorites, people will say it's this or that, but not able to demonstrate or show anything.
Yeah. It's a bit of a hard one with the meteorites. I mean, heard people saying that they've never found them and things like that. I don't know. I
Yeah,
just put it in there because it, you know,
yeah, I can't
could be
speak.
horse bucky too. I don't know.
Yeah, but but it is interesting. Real quick, just stand that before we move on, is really understanding, right? Is when you see phenomena in the sky, is understanding too that there is whatever it may be. I don't know certain things, but there is something, a transfer of something happening that's happening before us, whether it's energy of some kind, electricity, right? Where you're then seeing something is coming into our observable field. It's
Mhm.
like if you put on certain glasses or something, like you'll be able to see like infrared or doing certain
Mhm.
things like in your cameras, right? That change, as you said, the medium to allow us to actually see something visually. Being
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
our eyes can only see so much, well, as we know it and we're told, but
Yeah, and the other thing is, I haven't got it on here, but the other one that I make an example of this connection between the sun and the moon is called a valve, which is basically the other names for like the vacuum tubes,
mm-hmm.
and um, so that's very similar. They used to use them for all the electronics as well as guitar amps and things like that. So in those, they have a cathode and anode and they're in a low pressure system. And so there is a transference of energy that would, there would be a signal between these cathode and anode. And, that would be, you'd be able to amplify by adding another bit of energy in there, amplify that signal with the cathode anode um, in that low pressure system.
Right.
And so that's what the amplifiers, these valves were doing, though, acting as amplifiers for the signal to increase the signal for the guitars, and you get that nice, or analog, organic feel. A lot of people still like that sound rather than digital.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah, so that is basically how I see these planets interacting. You're not going to see that movement between, but there's going to be a correspondence or an action between the two. Now, you do see basically the lit side of the moon. So I take them as obviously a middle ball. Now, that lit side of the moon is basically always pointing to the sun. So the phases are actually created by our position and the moon's relative position to the sun. So when we're looking at it as the moon's face is always going towards the sun, as we see it moving around, we're getting these moon phases, but it's always lit. That's as far as I can. That's as far as I understand it. And what's actually happening is basically an ionic wind is coming off that moon's surface and transferring to the sun. So in the galvanic cell, there's actually the production at the anode. There's the production of oxygen, and at the cathode, there's the production of hydrogen.
Right.
So it just sort of falls back into these. In some terms, falls back into the older heliocentric ideas of the sun's burning hydrogen, and I tend to agree. It's a plasma hydrogen, and plasma's really got three ways it's created. It's created through low pressure. It's created with a magnetic field, and so it's
Right.
there was another one. Low pressure, high temperature, and a magnetic field. So that's how you're going to create your plasmas.
Right. But it's this does go to show you though, right, is when you said earlier about bringing these two ideas and actually having them kind of coming together so we can have something like a template of something to really allow us to understand these bigger things, and not having it be like, oh, I have some stuff over here or I have some stuff over there. A lot of these models, right, of understanding that this type of stuff in regards to the way, and we'll get into this, I know, with like mythology and how many different countries and cultures across the world, thousands and thousands of years ago, up until just this last 90 years, basically, this idea of obviously this heliocentric, obviously you can say, with was it Galileo or whoever was saying, oh, it's everything evolves around the sun, but even still then people weren't behind that idea. It wasn't until really, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but until like maybe the last 100 years, 120 years, where it shifting into more of really becoming this, heliocentric model. But I could be wrong, but I just.
Yeah. No, I don't think they did have it as the heliocentric model as such. But if you do look at it in the terms of anode and cathode type, well, the sun is the only cathode, so the only sort of really high positive terminal. So it's interesting to say that, well, other things, all the other planets basically are anodes compared to the sun, so they're sending energy to the sun. It's almost like the sun is the iris for the rest of the planets. It's actually pretty interesting, especially if we're going to take this into the zodiac as an energetic calculator of basically the etheric frequencies and how they interrelate. It's actually quite interesting because you can see what planet's going to be interacting with what based on its based on where it sits in this gradient. So it's quite interesting. There's more work to be done on this sort of front, but it makes the zodiac not necessarily something that's pie in the sky type just talking about the past and future and all this sort of predicting your future and that sort of thing. It actually starts to work as a calculator for how these energies are actually operating with each other.
Well, just
and how
real quick.
planets are interacting.
See, so real quick, this is what I think is so fascinating about people who, like myself, are listening and taking this in is you're looking at this, as we know, as Crow says, it's the sky clock. Nature doesn't lie. It goes back to the sky clock. Everything goes back to the sun. And when you look at our modern day, what do most people think about the zodiac? Is not this idea of it explaining the relationship between planets and an energetic calculator. It's my horoscopes and all these things, as well as Zodiac the killer, the serial killer story that we were,
Yeah,
right?
they've done a good job of it's look at the same thing with Mercury. I mean, how many people have a viewpoint as soon as I bring up Mercury and what it is? Oh, it's a poison. Oh, it's got all these different associations. Oh, it's um, just there's so many different things about this idea of Mercury. Even sulfur. Oh, that's related to demons. Um, yeah, the zodiac. Oh, that's related to sort of telling the future and or just ridiculous
Saying
things.
it's paganism or something,
All of this stuff is, like they basically make it so it seems like it's ridiculous.
right? And this is the thing for myself is we talked the other day, like even just like with Mercury, right? Understandably, it has such a bad rap, but it's also just understanding the stuff that we're experiencing where it is lethal. It's not Mercury in its essence, in its form. It's that with something else, which is
Hmm.
that the alchemy that's causing a lot of damage for sure. It's not the mercury in itself.
No, well, yeah, and the other thing is like if you're going to, sit Mercury and let it, all the fumes come up and start breathing that in. Yeah, well, I can't imagine that's going to be very good for you. But just or if you're going to put it in something and try and inject it straight into your bloodstream, yeah, that's going to be pretty detrimental to your health. But these other cultures, would use it for different things. They'll be eating mercury. I mean, they knew how to make it into a cake. I mean, it sounds pretty nutty, but um, so there's a lot of stuff about these, and that's what they do. That's how they make it seem absurd. They make all this stuff seem absurd,
This is
and to hide the truth.
yeah, but this is just I'm on it now. Is as you said is when we look to what you're doing about trying to go back to how things were done before because there's so many answers that could be thought out or questions that could be really juggled out here is then going, okay, well, all these people from back then that we're trying to go back to understand how they viewed the world and how they were trying to
Hmm.
express it to us. Well, why were they using certain things that we now look as completely taboo or this and that? But yet all these other things, they were really onto something there. It's just like,
Well,
is there a
yeah,
reason why they were using certain things? And we've just been told, oh no, that's ridiculous. Look at what happened. They're stupid. Or like hearing about even just as silly as, oh, you know why the Mad Hatter was hat? Because of the mercury poisoning. And maybe it
yeah,
was. But it's just like these are the things that in my mind you talk about conditioning and programming. It's like, oh, that's how I take it. We're not taught this type of stuff of looking at it as the elements, the five elements in this case.
yeah,
Um,
and they do it with the numbers as well. They've got all these numbers out there. There's like people, see these numbers, and the fact is that those numbers are hiding things that you probably need to look into.
yeah,
Just because they're using them in a negative way doesn't mean that they're negative.
right.
And you look at the four elements or the five element systems. How many of these old, the Tibetan or the Chinese medicine is all based on five elements? So what are they talking about? Energy moving through the body, looking at it as a holistic system. The acupuncture points. I mean, that if that's not an energetic modality, I don't know what is. They're looking at energies flowing through the body and have actually mapped them based on phi. Uh, one of phi is built into the body, and they've found an energetic mapping for that. So,
Right.
yep, it's there. Um, and this is what they do, and you know
See,
we need to bring back
oh,
some of this stuff that, or at least look into it, that they're trying to hide,
right. But see, this is the beautiful thing about it, is that even with trying to hide it, people like yourself, people like Marty, and some of the other people really looking at all these pieces, is not just looking at something face value. As I've said many times here in my stream, but as well as in social media posts, is ask questions. That is your best tool in your pocket, to ask questions, be curious, and allow creativity to flow. When you allow that, this is what gives us that ability, in my opinion, to then tap into that Akashic record, tap into that, as they would say, aligning the chakras, to really tap into, God's, intelligence of this system that we're in, saying, hey, look, now that you're ready to take on this information, because you're in that alignment, that balance, which we'll talk about here soon, here you go. Here's some stuff for you. And how do we know this? When people, you hear about, big time scientists or whoever, they go to bed, they're trying to figure something out for years, they fall asleep and they get the answer to that thing, right? Or you have epiphanies in your dreams. Singer songwriters are like, oh man, I created this song out of a dream. Like, well, what is that, right? Or I was walking through the fields and it just sprung on me. I don't know how to explain it. It just showed up in my mind. Well, what is that? And in many of those cases, it's that ability to be open, asking questions, and just being one with nature, allowing yourself to be in the system that we're already in.
Yeah, and that's how because I was looking at the zodiac, as I said before, I was looking at the zodiac and going, well, what does this mean? I wasn't looking for an energetic model. I was just like, what is the four elements? What are they actually on about? And I'd gone through a bunch of information in astrology and things like that, and I'd sort of like, well, how did you come to these conclusions? That was the point. And by the end, I got frustrated. I was like, I'm sick of this.
Right.
So I just started drawing it over and over and looking at it and just started asking questions about it without actually having these already pre-made associations.
Yep.
And that's how I found it. And I don't think this is new at all. What I'm presenting here, I'm probably, the older guys that understood this probably would have done a way better job than me. You know what I mean? Like I'm only barely scratching the surface.
Right.
Of where this could lead, or what it actually means, and how it will get refined, and that sort of thing. But I don't think this is new at all.
Right.
I just sort of was lucky enough to stumble on it, and here I am.
Right. And just real quick, for those who might think this is all, all over the place or whatever that case is, look at your favorite movies. Look at Harry Potter. What is all that? It's alchemy. It's showing these systems around. Now, obviously, they're not necessarily showing you the sun and the moon. I mean, in some scenes they do, is showing with the wolves and things like that of certain episodes or parts of the films. But the thing is these are all allegories. These are all
they know it. Yeah,
they are showing you these stories of exactly this, and there's so many movies and so many shows that are doing the exact same thing. They're just doing it in a different way. We need to pay attention to that. We need to start to understand that, and we'll go through some of those maybe here if you want to dive into that, or if you want to jump into this first before I get ahead of us.
So you want to more into like the Trinity side of things, or
well, is there anything kind of like
this is?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think basically there's a lot more to this, and this is a good overview of some of the things, and definitely people can check out some of my other work on the channel. And so I think we've done a pretty good overview of some of the main sort of topics that we've looked at. We haven't got into the nitty gritty of say the salt bridge and the different components of the earth and that sort of thing. But yeah, definitely just to let people know that there's more to be found, or there's lots more to this that we could possibly go into at a later date, for sure.
Yeah, no, I would love to tap into some of that, but if possible, yeah, I think maybe jumping into maybe some of the mythology aspect of it, just so people can see that you're showing
Yeah.
this part of it, this component of showing, hey,
Uh,
here is the nuts and bolts of what could possibly be a representation of what we're doing, or a direct correlation of where we are living, but then also showing how it pertains to everywhere else, and has been expressed. Because I think, being that we are in such and this is just as humans, we need stories. We need, as we said last time we spoke, we need a character to be the embodiment of certain qualities and traits and things like that. This is what part of it where I think people are going to definitely be a little more like, all right, this makes a little more sense. But
okay, can you see that on my screen or not?
I see your galvanic cell setup you have.
Okay, so this one's not showing up. Just give me a second. I'll exit.
Oh, yep. Okay, now we're back here.
Yep, I'll get onto this other one.
No worries.
Okay, so this is our basic, the basic Trinity that we're looking at, which is the creator, the sun. So that'd be the sun side of things, and the destroyer, which is the moon side of things. And this idea of these communication between the two, and this balance point between these two polarities.
Hmm.
And that's really all the Trinity is. It's this idea of we can see these symbols here, which is, just a representative of these two polarities coming together. And that most of it's to do with this preserver idea. This is the balance in us.
Yep.
This is, we have both the right and left hands, or we have the right brain, left brain, or we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system.
Right.
So yeah, that's, we're getting this idea of the yeah, the polarity, and then that central point in the middle.
Right.
And
And
so these are just representatives of that.
yeah. And so, for those understanding that, what is the one thing everyone says with just in your everyday life? Disregard this for a sec. Oh, work life balance, eating healthy, allowing yourself
Hmm.
to indulge, just having a balance. We always use these words that we don't necessarily understand just the power of them and what they really represent of ourselves, in allowing us to tap into potentials. Talking about electrical potentials, human potentials,
Hmm.
understanding your balance, when to know how to tether that. And as you said here, it's the creator, the destroyer, the preserver, in regards to that middle point. How to, as I've said to you the other day, but there's this lady, Elizabeth A. Stanley. She wrote a book called Widen the Window. Um, Real quick, it talks about how to handle your stresses and fears, taking your window of what you can handle, just
Hmm.
learning how to widen it,
Hmm.
in a nutshell. And that's just
Hmm.
that, is finding that balance, but allowing that road you're on not to be a tightrope, but rather a nice calm road, so you know how to handle yourself in that left right
Hmm.
hemisphere, left right hand, parasympathetic, sympathetic, knowing how to work within those, but not being, like this on the tightrope, but learning how to walk on a nice big highway.
Hmm.
When you have
Hmm.
that type of balance.
And so this is where Mercury comes back into it, and Mercury has a number of different names, and you can relate him to the central point in, or the central figure in most of the religions.
Hmm.
And he's exactly that. Is as we saw with, is part of the planets, or the manifestation of the planets, is part of the sun, part of the moon.
Hmm.
So it's involved in both those two polarities. And
Yep.
so it is the thing that joins, is the common nature of the two polarities,
Yep.
and joins them. And so this is where you get the idea of, the masculine and the feminine. So in the older um past, the masculine was the moon, the
Mhm.
feminine was the sun. So the Mercury was neither sun nor moon, but both of them. So it was this idea of the joined masculine and feminine forces, and in essentially it was the fifth element, the thing that was us. He was a representative of human consciousness and the human spirit as well. You know,
Hmm.
and breath and life and all these different things of this balance point between, and this connection. So, and that's why he's involved in communication. There's so many different parts to this idea that is born from this energetic model of the world. So they're not separate ideas. There's a spiritual component to this, battery. You don't want to say battery and it's like, oh well, it's just a thing. No, there's a spiritual component to how we perceive these things as well.
Absolutely.
That we're not. Yeah. So well, let's not just be too intellectual and too sort of, you know scientific in a sense with it. Let's pull the spirituality with it so that we can sort of get meaning from it in a spiritual sense, and in how we operate through our day. So it's not either or. This is the creative and the intellect coming together to create a whole,
Right.
and that's what Mercury represents.
But yeah, but that just goes to show you real quick, if I may, when we talk about the spiritual side, right? The creative, creator, there's this creation that's occurring. Obviously, yes, we are creating, but a lot of what of our ideas come from something bigger than us. We don't know where it comes from. Like in understanding, right, is that yes, you could be very intellectual and scientific about everything, or you could be completely creative but not having that intellect. So you can be
Yeah.
all about the spiritual side, but not taking action, not really doing testing observation, really looking into it, asking questions. And you see, right, both those types of people, right? And
Yeah.
what ends up happening, most times, a lot of
Well, you don't want to be too far one way or you end up going nuts either way, don't you?
well, what ends up
Yeah.
well, take a second, real quick, if I may. What happens when you get people who are too scientific, intellectual, right? They'll tell you, you know, oh, with my information, I would know this. I would have done it this way. I would have done it this way. Where the creative person's like, well, I just did it. Well, you keep saying you're going to do it, right? There's this, oh, well, I would have done it this way. Well, I would have done it that way. Oh, I've been working on this thing for 10 years. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Yeah, it's not ready. It's not perfect. Or, you know what I mean? And then you'll get people on the creative side even too. It's like, oh, it's not perfect. It's not this.
Yeah.
But it's just this fine line of like, well, where is that? As we said, where is that balance point of knowing, hey, this is now what I can bring out into the world. I've taken a seed of an idea or something, and then I've then allowed it to manifest into material existence.
So there's the other thing here is that Trinity also represents past, present, and future.
Mm-hmm.
So the past would be the lunar side. The future side would be the creative, the sun side, and then the present is where we are in the center.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where you want to be. You want to be. You don't want to be in the living in the past. It's full of things that you could have missed or whatever.
Right.
And then you don't want to be too far in the future thinking about things that are never really,
Yep.
without actually getting anything done in the present. So again, we're seeing this Trinity play out where you want to be in the present moment, operating both the future and the past. You want to be, taking control in that form as well.
Yep.
I've got this around the wrong way. I'll explain in this. Try and get you. You keep disappearing off the shot. Anyway,
I am.
so I've got this around the wrong way. The feminine is the sun, the masculine is the moon, and this is Osiris is that the lunar side, and usually depicted as white and green for fertility, because he basically is to do with planting. You plant by the lunar phases and things like that. So yeah, there's that sort of connotation. There's a lot more to it, but same with Thoth, Horus, and Sheshet. These are older Egyptians, and you got Horus in the center. Concept.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
She's Sheshet is.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Okay.
There's a delay.
So you've got Thoth is the moon. You can see the moon symbol here, and Sheshet. What's interesting is Sheshet is like the architect, and she gives information to Thoth, and then Thoth gives it to man. So it's like the creative side gives information to the intellect, and the intellect translates it to us. So that's what it's trying to depict. And it's got the tree of life here, or the brain, or nervous system, and they're both part of that each side. It's a great picture, actually.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And she's got the lion dress. So yeah, to do with Leo, the lion, again, a symbol for the sun. And this is her flower. It's the lotus flower. I mean, the lotus has a whole creation story to it as well, but you can see the blue sky with the yellow sun.
Yep. And notice how the sun's within the blue, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah. I think there's a moon one as well. I think it's white, but so this one here is to do with Hinduism, and so they have the overall mother, that this all matter, the first material in a sense that comes from, is almost like the potential energy the universe springs from. Where it's drawn from. And you can see here we've got Brahman. They have a little bit different. Brahman, Shiva, and then we've got Vishnu, sorry. And you can see that there's a similarity. He's got blue, but he's got this crown, and so they're matching these two. And again, this is our Mercury figure, the balance point between the two polarities of moon and sun.
Yep.
Yep.
So, and this is
very cool.
This is what's so fascinating about it is, I know people have seen the movie The Zeitgeist, and how all of these different cultures and times in history where you're seeing and hearing these stories and pictures showing exactly what we're showing here. Is there's comparisons across the board. Well, first question is, well, why are there these comparisons? What is it that they were all experiencing or understanding and trying to express? And a lot of times we've been programmed to think, oh, it's extraterrestrial and it's these things. In many ways, here's the thing. It could be, right? If we understand real quick in regards to this ice wall, we don't know what's past Antarctica. Technically, that could be considered extraterrestrial. Terra, Earth, where we are, right? Is that outside of our Terra? Maybe. I don't know. But what's interesting is when you understand it, showing the comparison with the metals and the zodiac and the skyclock, it's showing you very clearly this is what we're seeing. And this is what they're all trying to express, is that when you look up, you're going to get a lot more information than you realize.
Well, the other thing is that I find fascinating. So if you look at this picture here, look how many symbols are inlaid in it.
Yeah.
So if you understand how memory is created and how associations are creating, that's why that mind map's so good. It brings all these different associations together and puts them in the right spot. But associations are extremely important for how your mind works and how you remember things, and how you can make, say, an association between Shiva's staff here, or his trident, and then she's got the trident. So each one of these symbols can have a bunch of information that you understand about it, and then by simply looking at a picture, boom, 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 you remember everything. Yep. And it's just a memory technique. and when applied correctly, those guys that know how to make associations with, say, phone numbers or numbers and things like that, and they can basically remember um, a whole telephone book. It's just like crazy amounts of numbers they can remember by doing these association techniques.
Yep.
And so I think, our older cultures are not just drawing pretty pictures and, coloring, him blue for some reason, but there are all associations that you can link up. And then in one picture, you can go boom, boom. There's tons of information right at your fingertips. And it's just, we may not necessarily know what all these, me personally anyway,
Right.
don't know exactly what all these symbols represent.
Totally. I'm gonna softball you here right now. So with the picture here. So for those who might think even just that we're getting way out there, when you watch your superhero movies and you have your favorite superheroes, for those listening, I know we all have watched them to some capacity. Think about your favorite superhero, what they're wearing, what they look like, how they present themselves. So when you see them in the film, they're not just representing one thing, they're representing something much bigger. They're a culmination of different ideologies of what the perfect man or the perfect woman is carrying superhuman powers. That being said, can we describe the red and the blue in your Supermans and your Spider-Mans and your Captain Americas and what that all basically is coming back to? I'm jumping around.
Red and blue. Oh, like this.
Oh, you
You
mean
mean?
like this?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So there we go. There's Superman. He's the modern day Mercury. Basically, he's got the red for the sun, blue for the moon, and he's joined into one man to create the Superman.
right,
Same with what is it, Spider-Man?
Spider-Man, Captain.
Even Neo does it in the Matrix. When he's going out of the Matrix and he puts his hand into that mirror, and then Mercury covers his body.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all there. Once people see it, they're like, wow,
Right.
it's
And
right
so,
in front of you. So
but real quick, this is what for me, and this was just blew my mind, is when people will tell me, oh, you're this, you're this. Well, why would they lie? What if everyone knew about it? Wouldn't we know? Wouldn't they tell us? And it's like, well, they are. They're telling us so much, but the problem is that being that a lot of us haven't been taught this, or we aren't willing to look into this, or wanting to understand or make sense of it, then it becomes a situation where there are people who can say, hey, we did tell you, you just didn't look. And
I think we're attracted to the information too anyway. Well, for me, and personally, I'm attracted to the information. It
right,
makes sense to me. We want maybe something deep inside us. We want to go back to understanding our world and understanding. And so when they put it up in front of us, and you know, they make a lot of money from our attraction to this
right.
information,
Well,
to getting back to nature in some
yeah,
way, or understanding ourselves.
yeah. Well, this goes back to understanding, as you said, with Mercury. What is Mercury? It's the balance point. It's your creator, destroyer, your preserver. And when we understand that in many ways that we are Mercury, we are that balance point. What they're basically saying to us is that you are superhuman. You have the potential. There's potential in all of you. There was even a TV show called uh, like Superhumans. It was based off of what's his name, the gentleman who did all these superhero movies. Um, the old gentleman who passed away. I forget his name. Everyone, yeah,
Yeah, he showed up in all the movies,
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
he?
yeah, yeah. I forget his name.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but there was a show where
Old guy, glasses.
yeah. There was a show that he had where he would go, he had like a dude who was like really flexible, go and find people who are superhuman and doing these crazy feats of things that would be like the superheroes we'd see in the movies. And they're real life people. And I don't know the validity of all the things, but I do know that we see people doing superhuman things all the time, running under a 4-minute mile, people who can jump super high. And we look at these things and we go, wow, that's crazy that someone can do that. We enjoy watching these movies and shows and clips because they get millions of views and millions of dollars. But what these things are saying in many ways is that You're that Mercury. We all have that potential of some
Mm.
capacity of another. It's learning how to tap into it. It's learning how to, as you said, connect back with nature. And this is what's so fascinating for me about the human potential.
Yeah, and a lot of those, like even though and martial arts are all based on that, these ideas of balance and
Yeah,
it's all Mercury ideas as well. It's just it really extends throughout whatever thing you're looking at, and that's the beauty of it because Trinity can be applied everywhere.
right.
I think that's probably it for now.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
that's a
I
good
mean,
place to stop. Really.
yeah, no, this is great, man. I don't want to keep you anymore. We've been going for almost 2 hours. This is awesome. But, I definitely wanted to go through this because more than anything, I'm fascinated by it. And for those who want to sit and, look at complaining and arguing about, the shape of the earth or whatever the case is, this isn't the point of it. It's a matter of looking at understanding that there is an electric system that which we are in, and
Hmm.
yourself and now myself want to understand more about it. There's
Hmm.
that eagerness to learn, and I think we should all
Yeah.
be looking at that. Instead of fighting and complaining, just being like, look, there's a potential, electric potential, that we need to try to understand more about. There's something happening in the sky all the time. We can map it out. We set things based off of this, and there's a reason for it. What is that reason? What are the potentials that we aren't understanding? And then, as you said, as above, so below. Look at ourselves here. What?
Yeah, and yeah, what are these overall relationships between us and the world?
Yes,
What can we gain? And that's right. And when we put it into context, what do we actually get? We get an energetic system that we can apply to ourselves, and I think it's just fascinating. And the potential of it is, to me, it's amazing. I have no idea where it's going to go, but you know, I think it's, I people take it and get to know it a little bit and spend some time with it and see if they gain something from it, because I certainly have. I think the information's helped me no end. So
absolutely, man. I couldn't agree
mm,
more, and I'm super appreciative of your time and the fact that you were willing to come on and share this with not just me but everyone listening. And with that, man, where can people find you? Um, yeah,
just you can go and check my channel out at LC King, and yeah, I'm on IRM, Iron Realm Media as well. So yeah, come and see me there on the radio show, and yeah, I'm around. So yeah,
awesome. I highly recommend
thanks.
everyone go check out LC King on YouTube as well as Iron Realm Media. I enjoy both of them very much, and if you like what we're talking about today, I guarantee you're gonna love the other content that Lucas has been putting out. But on that, I wish you all well. Again, thank you, Lucas, for coming on. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Awesome, man.